Well, welcome. My name is Kate Purcell. I'm going to start by going through our closed caption guide if anyone is in need of any translation services. So you should be able to see my screen. It's a closed caption guide. Shailene, do you see it? I see you on my screen, Shailene. Okay. Shailene is my eyes. All right, so if you are in need of captioning or translation services, the WebEx app that you download to your phone or your computer has that available. So from that application, in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you're going to see a CC box, like a little button. So that's going to be like the magical on-off button. So when you click it, it's going to turn white. And that's going to mean that the captions are on. So once they are on, you can choose your preferred language by clicking the little, I'm going to circle it with my cursor, the arrow / caret, whatever you want to call it. Once you click on that, the drop-down list of languages is going to populate. And then you can choose your preferred language from that list. The captions will appear along the bottom of the screen. There are a few settings that you can adjust, such as font size, background color, and to do that, you just click on these 3 dots to the right of the captions that pop up. And then another drop-down box will populate, and you can choose your different settings from that. If you have any issues accessing that or need any help, just send me a message behind the scenes and I can help you. All right, well, welcome again, everyone. My name is Kate Purcell. I'm the Member Relations Coordinator. Our Member Relations team works very closely with both care management teams and our members. Our goal is to provide meaningful educational resources like this forum. We also have an e-news. We provide one-on-one support to members, families, care managers, and we also have other opportunities to learn about available services and community resources. We're also here to support members and families who have questions or concerns about their care management or OPWDD services. We always encourage you to speak directly with your care manager, but our team is always available if you need any additional support. Throughout the forum, we'll be adding our email addresses to the chat so you can reach out to us if you'd like. If you haven't already, I encourage you to visit our agency website. We have a lot of great resources featuring our Knowledge Center and our Community Resource Tool. Both of these are designed to help you find services and supports that are helpful, specifically in your area. Again, I'll share that website throughout the forum in the chat. Little housekeeping note, just try to keep yourself muted during the presentation. We have the chat box open and available, so feel free to type any questions in there. And then at the end, we're going to save a little bit of time to go through those. Any resources that we discussed today will be shared afterwards within the next week with all registrants. So you'll get all of the great things that we talk about today within the next week or so. Today's forum is focused on educational advocacy. It's being recorded and will be emailed to everyone who is registered. If you have any other questions, again, reach out to your care manager or contact us directly. And with that, I'm very excited to introduce our presenters from Putnam Independent Living Services, Fiona Rattray and Denise Green. And I will hand it over to them.
Thank you very much. I think what we'll do, Denise, shall we introduce ourselves and then take the cameras off and just put the presentation up so people can focus on the presentation?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Yep.
So I'll let you go first, Denise.
Hi, I'm Denise Green. I'm with the Putnam Independent Living Services as part of what's known as the Parent Training Information Center. That's a federal Department of Education grant. I've been doing this job for over 15 years now. And we're really here to help parents to support them as they navigate the special education school system, really. I have 2 children. My oldest, Nicole, is actually aged out of school. She's now living in a group home with St. Dominic's. We're struggling to find a day program. When she was in school, she was classified autistic, and later on we changed the classification to intellectually disabled because we got more services that way. And my younger son, who is now 19, he's no longer in school. But when he was in school, he was on home instruction due to medical issues towards the end of his school career. Right now, he's actually studying to become an EMT. So, you know, we've run the gamut here. My daughter is at the low end of the autism spectrum, intellectually disabled, nonverbal, some behaviors in the teenage years. So we've been through a lot. And I'll let Fiona introduce herself.
Thanks, Denise. Denise told you about where we work. I've been working with Denise now for 6 years. My background is in education. I was a special education teacher back in the UK. I have a particular interest in dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. If anyone ever wants to reach out with questions about that, that's an area that I'm quite well up on. In terms of my role as a parent, I am a former sector president, and I have 2 children. They're both adults now. One is 27, the other is 18. They both have an autism, no, the other's 19, sorry. They both have an autism 1 diagnosis, but they are affected so differently. One of my children is much more profoundly disabled, for want of a better term, than the other one is. So without further ado, let's move into the webinar. So I'm just going to stop my video and I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Right, saying I can't share again. I think I need sharing privilege.
Oh, it took away your privileges. That's not okay.
It did.
Let's make you a presenter one more time.
Okay, I have it now.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so here we are, and I'm going to move straight into the next slide. And Denise really went over this already. So we actually cover the Hudson Valley. For parents who want to reach out direct to us, that you really need to be up in the Hudson Valley. But we're a parent training and information center, and they do exist around the state, including New York City. There's also organizations like Include NYC where you can reach out directly for support. And the 3 main things we do are we speak directly to parents who are needing advice and information. We provide trainings like this. And we also offer something called the Family Empowerment Advocacy Series, which is a 20-hour series that we do once a year that really digs down into how to be an effective advocate. Moving on. So before we dive in, we really want to give you a roadmap of what we're going to be covering in this session. So these 6 areas we consider to be the foundation of effective advocacy, and each one really builds on the other. So it starts with that understanding of the special education process itself. And there we're really talking about the laws, the procedures, and the rights that guide everything that happens in an IEP. Then we're going to talk about understanding your child's disability in depth, because the more you know about how your child actually learns and functions and what their challenges and strengths are, the better you can advocate for the right supports. Let's take a step back and look at long-term thinking and vision, because we need to really be thinking about the bigger picture, like, you know, how are we going to get your child as independent as they can be? What's the functionality that they're going to end up with? What's the future that you want for your child? Then we'll get practical. So we'll look at how to work with the school district, because advocacy is not just knowing what your child needs. It's also about how to collaborate, negotiate, and sometimes push when you need to. Then we'll talk about organization and planning. So good advocacy comes down to being prepared, keeping records, staying on top of timelines, etc. And then we'll address just a couple of pages on what to do when the going gets tough, because it gets tough. Advocacy can be really stressful and emotional and challenging, and I'm sure many of you have experienced that already. So we'll talk about things you can do to stay a bit more grounded and resilient when it gets really tough. I'm going to start with a personal anecdote. So this is me. When I first arrived in this country, remember, I was a special ed teacher back in the UK, so you would think I would have been better set up to deal with these things. But I didn't know my rights when I first got here, and I certainly didn't know my child's rights. And the one that I was particularly concerned about at the time was my eldest child, who was 9 years old. And honestly, when we got here, I was just profoundly grateful for the services that she was getting, and I didn't really want to rock the boat. So I was thinking, well, you know, they're helping her a lot more than she was helped in the UK, so who am I to complain? Anyway, move on to the beginning of 5th grade. And her teacher at the very beginning of 5th grade announced a big project of the year. Each child was assigned an animal and told to complete a series of tasks culminating in a presentation. You can see the tasks listed here. It's quite a few things. And I'm sure for many kids, this would be an exciting project. But for my daughter, it was an absolute nightmare because, as you can see here, she's autistic, but she also has acute anxiety, as many kids with autism do. She struggles with executive functioning, and time blindness in organization, generally speaking, are really challenging for her. She's dysgraphic, so writing a 1,000-word paper is not something that she's going to jump with joy at the prospect of doing. And she also processes information much more slowly than her peers, significantly more slowly. So this looming assignment, really for us, it wasn't a project, it was the bane of our existence, to be perfectly honest. And throughout that year, I tried to encourage her to get going on it. I didn't just encourage her, I cajoled her, I bribed, I begged, and nothing worked. So basically the tension just built all year long because she wasn't going to do her presentation until the end of May. And it all came to head on Memorial Day weekend because she was due to present on that first Tuesday back. And we battled through that entire weekend. There were tears, there was frustration on both sides. And by Monday afternoon, on Memorial Day, when we should have been relaxing at the beach, every piece was finally done. And all that remained was to assemble the trifold display board. And at that point, I thought, okay, she's not being graded on her stapling skills. So I picked up the staple gun and I finished it. Yeah, that's what I did. I stapled my dining table. I stapled the whole trifold display to my dining table. That's how stressed I was at that point. And that was the moment I realized just how far we'd been pushed by this ridiculous project. And here's the thing, had I known how to advocate back then, this whole situation could have played out so differently. First of all, I'd have asked for a meeting with the teacher at the beginning of the year. I would have suggested letting her choose her own animal. I mean, knowing my daughter, she would have chosen some sort of fictitious monster, but hey, if she's interested and she can do it, then fine. Secondly, I would have asked for extra time because when you've got slow processing and anxiety and dysgraphia, those deadlines can really make or break a project. And I would have asked for graphic organizers, which are tools that help break those assignments, those written assignments, down into smaller manageable steps instead of just letting the whole thing overwhelm not just her, but the entire family all year long. So the truth is there are many supports and interventions that could have been put in place. And if we'd had them, this project would have been a far more positive experience, not just for my daughter, but for me and for her teacher. And that's why it's really important to know how to advocate effectively, because when you do, what you will move to is a situation where you're not just reacting to problems at the last minute, you're shaping an environment where your child can succeed. And that's what we're aiming to do. Okay, I'm going to go on talking, and Denise is going to lean in with some information as well as we go on. So we know the special education system, navigating it can be really overwhelming. It's when you first start, it's almost like you're learning a new language. If you think about all the acronyms and the language that gets used, just look at any goals on an IEP and they can really throw you. And you're doing that whilst trying to fight for your child's future, which is probably the most important thing in your life. And Denise and I both know that feeling because, as we said, we've been there. So let's start with the first key to advocacy, and that's knowledge. So knowledge empowers you because the more you understand that process, the rights, the resources, you're not only going to become more effective, you're going to become more confident in securing the support that your child really needs.
And just to interrupt on the knowledge part, don't assume that everybody sitting in that CSE meeting knows the New York State rules and regulations. A lot of times they keep doing what they've always done, what the person in front of them did. I've had chairs say had the chairs who did not realize that they were doing things wrong. For example, when my child, Nicole, was supposed to be getting speech therapy and the speech therapist was out for a while, I told them that they had to make up the speech therapy. They also have to make up sessions for any time the therapist is out. If the therapist is sick, if the therapist is at a meeting, they have to make all those up. The school district didn't know that. They just thought that those went away. They don't go away. The same thing with transportation. If your child is placed in an out-of-district placement, your district is required to provide transportation for them, even if they're closed, unless if it's due to weather. My district did not know this. And I actually called the state because I thought it was ridiculous that my daughter's school was open, but Clarkstown wasn't, and she wasn't going to school. And that's when I realized that the school was responsible to transport her. I remember at the time, well, she was at Jesse Kaplan at the time, the principal said, "How did you find this out?" I said, "I called the state." The principal of Kaplan didn't know that. She then called all the school districts that were sending children to them, informing them they need to transport their children on days that Kaplan is open, unless it's due to weather. So don't assume that your chairs have the same knowledge. They don't always have the right answer. They don't always know, and sometimes they don't know what they don't know.
And I'll double down on that because, we're also talking about the teachers working with your child, the therapists sometimes, right now, and this is why I'm doubling down on it. I think Denise will concur with me. Since the pandemic, schools have been under way, way more pressure. They're struggling even to get staff at the moment. And I don't just mean teaching staff. And I'm sure some of you will have experienced this. There's difficulty getting speech therapists. There's difficulty getting occupational therapists. And so everybody's under a lot more strain and stress. And that means that the information doesn't always come through in a timely manner. So what Denise said is absolutely incredibly important to remember. And that's why we will say to you that one of the most important things that we've learned as parent advocates is that this knowledge is not optional. It's essential. You really need it because it's the backbone of your effective advocacy. So you need to know about your child's rights because those are legal protections that ensure that your child has that free and appropriate public education. We refer to that as FAPE. So if you see somebody talking about denial of FAPE, they're talking about your child not getting a free and appropriate public education. And if you don't know what those rights are, how are you going to be able to advocate for them? Secondly, it's a good idea to understand how the evaluation process works, because everything in the IEP really stems from the evaluations. And the quality of the evaluations is going to impact the services that your child needs. So if your child's evaluated and the school just does, say, a broad academic evaluation and a psychological evaluation, but your child has significant reading issues, they're not going to pull out your child's needs from just those two evaluations. You're going to need more than that to dig down and see what is actually causing the reading issues. So you need to know what's being measured and what might be being missed. The IEP is a legal document. So it's not just a set of suggestions, it's enforceable. If it's in writing, the school is obligated to deliver it. Not much more we can say about that. That speaks for itself. Your rights as a parent, you have the right to participate, you have the right to disagree, you have the right to request changes, you have the right to bring in outside information, you have the right to bring, frankly, anyone you want to the CSE meeting, as long as you give 72 hours advance notice. It would be rude to just turn up with someone. I once did that. I once turned up with my father, but and again, I didn't really understand the process at the time. But you can bring people to your meeting. Denise, do you want to add anything on that?
Yes. If you are working with an educational advocate, a good one will insist on you telling the district that they're coming. Just the same way that you don't want to be surprised. The district should not be bringing anybody into the meeting that's not listed on that invite. If you're working with a special education attorney, you have to let the district know. Because if you don't and you show up with that attorney, the district is going to cancel the meeting and you're going to pay the attorney for the travel time, the time they sat there, and the travel time back, and they're going to do no work. The district is not responsible for paying the fees associated with you bringing in an attorney or an outside therapist or a professional. That would be on you. But you are entitled to bring anybody that you want to bring. If you are somebody who can't take notes and, speak at the same time or listen at the same time, bring a friend, take notes for you. That's okay. You bring whoever you need to bring in order to get your child their free and appropriate public education. You just have to let the district know. It's common courtesy. And sometimes it's just so much they have to change the room that the meeting is going to be in. If they're planning on 6 people and you're planning on bringing 6 people, they're going to need a bigger room. And CSE,
if it's in person.
If it's in person. A lot of them now are on Zoom or on Google Classrooms, Google Meets. And again, I know it's a little intimidating because a lot of times it's just either the mom or the dad or the guardian going in, and there's 12 other people from the district. So it can be a little, It can be a little intimidating. So especially when you're newer to the process, you do want to bring somebody with you, if just for moral support.
And then last but not least, nothing set in stone. Okay, the IEP is not a document that doesn't move. It can and it should evolve as your child grows and as new needs emerge. Okay, a lot of parents, I think, get the impression that they're stuck with that IEP for the whole year. That's not true. You always have the right to request a meeting or revisions to the IEP. There are some minor revisions that can take place without having a meeting. You will have to sign something called a no meeting amendment. If it's something significant, then you need to have a meeting. But you can call those at any time. You don't want to abuse that. You don't want to be calling a meeting every week unless there's a significant issue going on. But you do have the right to have meetings. You don't have to wait till the annual review to sit and discuss everything.
And just to piggyback on that, I call it the parent tummy. When that stomach of yours starts going off that something's not right, that's when you need to start speaking out to the team. Don't ignore that stomach. I find the parent stomach is usually very accurate. When you start thinking about it when you're sleeping and it's taken over your mind and your stomach is bothering you, you know something's not right, that's the time to call a meeting. You may not know what's not going right, but that meeting may shed the information that you need. Don't ignore that parent tummy. It is more accurate than not.
So how do we get this information? Okay, because it's overwhelming. We would suggest that you start by understanding the general federal IDEA guidelines. IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and that's the backbone of special education law. And that law applies across the country. You then have each state will have its own regulations that put IDEA into practice locally. So it's important to get to know the New York State rules and regulations. And this can be overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. There are tools out there to help you. And the Special Education in Plain Language is a booklet that's produced by the Special Education Task Force in New York. And it breaks everything down from legal jargon and wording into stuff that you can actually use and understand easily. It's a little bit out of date, but they are working right now on a new version of it. Nonetheless, I would recommend that you download the one that exists now. You just have to Google, and we can send a link as well to Kate, Special Education in Plain Language New York. It's available also in Spanish, and we would recommend downloading it, printing it, highlighting it, and bringing it with you to meetings. Also remember that you have training out there available to you, trainings like the one that you're attending right now. So be on the lookout with, all of this organization. We mentioned Include New York before, FACE centers, parent training and information centers. They're all going to be providing training, which will also help. Let's not move again, just a second.
The New York State rules and regulations is known as Part 200. That is the regulation that you need to start to learn. Unfortunately, you can't download the regulations in one swoop anymore. They used to have a PDF version on the website, New York State Department of Education, but they took that away. Now you have to download each page almost one by one. It's really not as user-friendly as it should be. And if your child is starting to face disciplinary action, it's Part 201 of the New York State rules and regulations that you want to become very familiar with. Currently, New York State gives more and requires more special education than the IDEA does. We as parents have to make sure that we don't lose those extra rights.
Yeah,
because our children will suffer.
Sorry to talk over you, Denise. What you can do is you can Google. So you can go onto Google and you can say, for example, Goals and Progress Reports, New York State Education, and it should take you to the section of the rules and regulations that addresses that area. Or if you're looking at something like language exemption. Kids with IEPs can be exempted from the foreign language in high school. Again, you should be able to Google that and get the specific guidelines on that from New York State Education Department.
And I think, Fiona, you would agree with me. And as the slide says, no parent should do this alone.
Yeah.
You're going to need support. Find the websites that are very helpful. Understood.org is an amazing website. A day in our shoes is another good website to be part of. Wilk & Pills, we also post when our trainings are going to occur on our websites. Starbridge, who holds the Parent Training Information Center grant for most of New York State, except for the city and Long Island and Suffolk counties, they do have videos on their website that you can watch on your own time when you're available. I would highly recommend that you join the SEPTA, which is the Special Education PTA in your district, or if your district does not have one, join the one that's closest to you. SEPTAs often bring in outside professionals to talk about things, and it also gives you an opportunity to connect with other parents who have children with disabilities. What you want to find is what I always refer to as the older parent. And by older, I don't necessarily mean that they're older than you. I mean that their child is further along in the system than your child is. They can also help you navigate and potentially help you not make some of the same mistakes that they made. So they can be very helpful. And if you start to find this as being really overwhelming, join a support group. A lot of times there are support groups available, and you can join that so you can talk to other parents who are in the same situation that you're in. Because sometimes being a special ed parent can be a little lonely. You know, every else's kid is going to the basketball game. Every other's kid's going to these birthday parties, but your child won't even go into the McDonald's without having a meltdown. It can be lonely and isolating. You're going to have to find your own support. And I tend to find out over as the years have progressed, the ones that become your support group end up becoming your friends who also have children that have special needs a lot of times, because they can understand what you're going through.
Yeah, I mean, I can 100% say I would not be sitting here as a sane person right now if it weren't for the friends that I have who also have children with disabilities. They have really kept me going throughout everything. So yeah, look for your people, find support, do not do it. And I'm surprised that, well, not surprised because we're all busy, but I often talk to parents and I say, do you know someone else? And oftentimes they don't. And that can be, that's so isolating. You're going to get not only the moral support, you're going to be talking to someone who gets it, like no one else gets it. But you're also going to find information from them. You know, they will tell you about what's on their kids' IEP, how they dealt with their CSE meetings. There's just so much to be gained from talking to other parents. And as support groups go, they can be pretty specific. I mean, I know Facebook has its issues, but if you look at Facebook alone, you can find a support group for pretty much anything. Give you an example. So I've been in autism support groups for years and years. I recently discovered that my 19-year-old has a condition called alexithymia, which a lot of people with autism have, and it's about an inability to express yourself. So people with alexithymia find it difficult to identify how they're feeling and to express how they're feeling. And lo and behold, I found a group I could join. So now I can get additional support about this new thing that we always knew something was going on there, but we didn't realize it actually had a name, and you know, other people out there who can talk to you about it. Okay, so now we're going to talk about considering how your child is impacted by their disability and your understanding of that, because that's really important. You may have heard that saying, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. But that's not true just for autism, it's for every disability. No two children are exactly alike, you know that. So the way a diagnosis affects one child can look completely different in another child. And unfortunately, because of the things we said before about, you know, sometimes schools not having all of the information at their fingertips or not having the experience in that area, they may make the assumption that what worked for that child with dyslexia is going to work for your child, or what worked for that child with emotional difficulties is going to work for your child. And that's why it's so important for you to really take the time to get to know and understand and be able to talk about your child's unique profile. And remember, you want to be able to talk not just about their challenges, but their strengths as well, because hopefully we can leverage those strengths. And this will lead to you being able to advocate for your child as a whole person rather than as a label. We do not want an autism IEP. We want an IEP for your child. So what you can do in order to help you pull that information together is build a kind of advocacy toolbox. I mean, obviously not a literal toolbox, but just to give you some strategies and ideas and tools that are going to be useful for you in advocating for your child. So you want to be documenting their strengths and challenges as you go. Give you an example. And Denise, you can tell me if you've experienced this as well. I've often talked to parents who have children with a diagnosis of autism. And as part of the conversation, I've said to them, and what about their sensory needs? And it's quite surprising how often someone will say to me, well, they don't have any sensory needs. And then I will say, okay, so they're fine with all of the, oh, no. They won't wear jeans. They won't wear tight clothing. They won't wear something with and they're a fussy eater. And you start to see that actually, yes, this child has some sensory issues. You want to be documenting those sensory issues and sharing that with the school, because sensory issues could well be impacting them in the classroom. It could be sound sensitivity. It could be that, the teacher or whoever's working with your child thinks that they're misbehaving because whenever it comes to painting, they refuse to do it. Well, guess what? Maybe they have a profound sensory issue when it comes to getting sticky or gooey stuff on their hands. So we want to be able to document everything that's going on with our children that might impact how they learn in the classroom. And if you document it, you're going to have a clearer picture and you're going to be more effective in explaining that to the school team that works with your child. The next thing to have in the toolbox is that knowledge that supports and interventions can be adjusted. So if something isn't working, it doesn't mean your child is failing necessarily. It might mean that the support that they're getting needs to be fine-tuned. So maybe they need an additional accommodation. Maybe they need individualized occupational therapy instead of group occupational therapy. Maybe the goal needs to be changed slightly on their IEP. And talking of goals, tracking those IEP goals is absolutely essential. So you will get progress reports. Those progress reports will come out every time your child gets a class report. And you usually get them 1 to 2 weeks after you get the class report. And what they will do is they will list the goals that are on the IEP, and they will tell you whether or not your child is making expected progress towards meeting those goals. Often that's all it tells you. A good progress report will give you a bit more detail than that and tell you actually what's going on and in what way they're not on track to meet that goal. Regardless of that, if you see that they're not on track, you want to be asking questions about that. Is the goal too hard? Have they got the right supports in order to actually achieve that goal? One goal that really drives me nuts, that's given to a lot of kids with ADHD, is we'll use their planner to record homework. And the goals, by the way, are supposed to be something they work on throughout the entire year. And they meet the goal. If it's been if it's a good goal and it's been carefully planned, they will meet that goal in June. Do you really want them to meet, to spend a whole year trying to master the art of recording their homework in their planner? I would say that that's a goal that you need to be looking at that very first progress report. And if they're not on track, we need to change that goal. Because if they've had supports to use their planner and they're still not succeeding with it, maybe the planner's never going to work for them and we're going to have to look at something else.
I want to add something about the IEP progress reports.
Yeah.
For those of you that know me or been on some webinars before, they're the bane of my existence. Because on those progress reports, there's 4 letters that your child can get. A is for achieved, meaning they can do this, and they can do this for anybody, and that includes me. So if I was to walk in your home today and your child is supposed to be able to do something because they haven't achieved, they should be able to do it for me. Progressing gradually means that they're on track. Oh, progressing satisfactorily, PS, means they are on track to meet the goal at the end of June. Progressing gradually means, we're not quite on track. They may or may not make the goal. And at that point, you need to start asking questions. Progressing inconsistently means they're not going to make the goal. Again, then you need to start asking questions. A lot of times what I'll see on progress reports is, child is progressing satisfactorily. They'll put a PS, and then they'll give you the definition of PS. That is not a progress report. That does not tell you anything, because what my definition of satisfactory is going to be different than yours, is going to be different than Fiona's. You should have a goal that's measurable, and they should be able to tell you how many times, what percentage of times they're doing it. If they don't give you that information, email them and ask for it. I used to email my team. It took them about 2 progress reports before they realized that every time this progress report comes out, I'm going to ask for this information. And because you tend to stay with the same therapist and same teachers in special ed, especially the self-contained classes, for 3 years, I would have to retrain the teachers and the therapist every 3 years about, I'm not accepting PG, progressing gradually, as the answer on a progress report. Don't accept it.
It doesn't tell you anything.
Do not accept that.
Yeah. All it tells you is things aren't going the way they need to. You need more detail than that. And your child needs to understand that as well. You know, if they're capable of understanding it, they need to know. They need to understand what their goals are and how they're working towards their goals, because they should be part of the conversation, especially as they get older.
And if most of your goals are not achieved by the end of the school year, you need to start questioning whether or not if that placement that you're in is appropriate.
Yeah.
Because they should achieve, in theory, every single goal on that IEP by the end of June. Now, I don't think it's rare that I see every single child, getting achieved at the end, but at least 90% of those goals should be achieved. If they're not, you need to start asking some serious questions. Is this placement appropriate? Do we have the right services in place?
Yeah, and they shouldn't be repeated either. You know, if you have a goal on the IEP, the same one year in, year out, your child's not making progress. So that's something else to look out for. You need to stay up to date with apps and technology, especially right now. And it's overwhelming. I know it's overwhelming. That's where I would recommend, if you're comfortable using AI to really hone in on the stuff that's going to work for your kids. But apps and technology are changing all the time. There's loads of great stuff out there to support kids with ADHD. There's loads of apps that focus on the various skills that you need to develop your reading for kids with dyslexia. There's an app that I've just had my son download to help him with his alexithymia and expressing himself. So keep an eye out for those, and follow the experts, not the opinion people. There's far too many people out there these days that express opinions with nothing to back them up. We want the experts. We want the people who've been in this field for years and years and years. Again, if it's, for example, ADHD, attitude, that's spelled ADD at the beginning as opposed to ATT for attitude. Attitude is a great resource if you have a kid with ADHD. There are, Denise, can you remember the guru for behavior, for positive behavior? His name escapes me right now.
Oh.
We'll send it to Kate afterwards.
I can picture the books too in my mind.
Yes, so can I.
And the videos, and I'm just drawing a blank on his name.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to move on to the next slide. And we're now going to move on to talking about vision and long-term thinking, because it's so easy, and I've done this so many times myself, to really get caught up in the here and now, especially when you're preparing for that next IEP meeting. What we tend to do is we're really focusing on what's in front of us. So what are the goals? What are the services going to be? What's going to be written into the IEP for this year? But if you want to be a really strong advocate, you need to be looking further down the road, because let's think about what your real long-term goal is. It is not just to get through another IEP cycle. You want to help your child grow into the most functional and independent version of themselves. So that's why when a reading goal, or any academic goal actually, is that you as a parent need to step back and ask, is this goal truly sequential? In other words, does it logically follow on from the goal they achieved last year? Is it building their skills in a way that makes sense? And most importantly, is it helping to close the gap between your child and their peers? Because every IEP should be part of a plan that steadily moves your child closer to catching up, or at least narrowing that gap in time for graduation from high school, whether that be at the age of 18 or the age of 22. So advocacy is not just about today. It's about ensuring that you take steps aligning with that bigger picture of independence and opportunity. And keep that future in focus, right? We want you to think of your child as a tree, or any child as a tree, because what you see on the surface, that might be some of their strengths, it might be some of their challenges, it might be how they're progressing right now, is only part of the story. If you think about it, beneath that, like roots, there may be some untapped potential that you're not fully seeing yet. Each child's got their own strengths, as we said, their own weaknesses. They're all going to move along on a different timeline, but hopefully they are moving forward. They are making progress. So our job as advocates is to kind of nurture that and give them support and vision that allows them to grow strong and independent over time. So we don't want to limit them. History reminds us why this matters. If you think back 100 years ago, someone like Stephen Hawking, that's the guy in the middle picture there, he would have probably been hidden away in an institution, which would have been a great loss to humanity. He was a professor of mathematics at Cambridge University in the UK. He wrote several books explaining the universe. Okay, so he had the supports. They recognized that he was able to contribute, and his ideas have actually reshaped how we understand the universe now. If you think about non-verbal children with autism, they may have once been dismissed as being incapable, and now, because of spell to speak and other tools where, okay, they're still not talking, they're not enunciating words verbally, but they are conveying their thoughts and feelings by typing, all right? And they're revealing profound depth of thought that people didn't even realize that they had. So these examples are really here today for you to see that, you know, there is possibility ahead. We don't know what lies ahead. So when you walk into that CSE meeting or an advocacy setting, you want to keep that long-term vision in focus. Think about independence, think about functionality, think about dignity and opportunity. Because oftentimes, if we go back to that tree analogy, the roots grow before the branches start to spread. Okay, the roots will go deep into the ground and then the tree will start to flourish above ground. So with some patience and then some advocacy, you may well find that the children, your children, are capable of achieving far more than the world expects of them today. So, you know, just this year, we've got Anna Victoria on the left here, who has become the world's first lawyer with Down syndrome. And then we have, I forget her name, Jordan Zimmerman on the other side. She is completely nonverbal, and yet she's an advocate and a writer. So just bear that in mind. Okay, now we're going to move on to talking about working with the district. Did I hear any groans there? Did you hear any groans, Denise? I'm sure there were. We know, we talk to parents all the time, so we know the idea of partnership with the school can sound kind of unrealistic or maybe even impossible based on what you've experienced so far. Many of you, I'm sure, have had to fight just to get the basics, and you're going to feel quite mistrustful, and it's natural to feel that way. So we want to be clear about this. Partnership's not about rolling over. It's not about ignoring problems or giving up. It's really about approaching advocacy with strategy so that the effort you put in actually yields results, positive results. So the first thing we would say is lay the groundwork. You know, even if you don't like the people in the districts, or you get a bad feeling from them, or, you know, your initial communication wasn't very positive, you still need to try and be one of the people who builds those positive relationships with the people at the table, with the teachers, with the districts, because you're going to be working with the districts if your child stays in the same district for a long time. And then with communication, you want to be clear, you want to be consistent. Don't go with, you know, I feel this, I feel that. You want to write down and show evidence of what you're seeing, and keep the focus on your child. Try not to focus on personalities or any conflicts that you have. Let's keep bringing it back to your child and your child's needs. For collaboration, again, it doesn't mean you can't push back, but think about it. If every meeting's a confrontation, you're not going to get anywhere. So what you want to try to do, and sometimes this involves us being the bigger person, is to frame yourself as a partner in trying to solve the problem. Because actually, when it comes down to it, everyone in the room or in the CSE meeting is supposed to share the same goal. And many of them do. It might not seem obvious to you that they do, but their goal is the same as yours, for your child to be successful. And then finally, really keep at it, all right? It does take persistence, but if you stay informed and organized and don't give up, that's really the key to everything. Because advocacy is not something that we just achieve. You know, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And sometimes just showing up, being prepared, being consistent, it makes a difference. It might not feel like it at the time, but over the years it does. Denise, did you want to add anything on that?
A lot of these tips and tools that we're giving you today can also be applied in the adult world. The agencies that are working with your child still have to follow the rules and regulations that the state puts on them. So at times when they're not doing what you think they should be doing, you need to find those regulations and bring it to their attention. But this all goes back to, and I think is the vision that you and your child have. Years ago that I had heard a story where most children ask what they want to be, kindergarten, first, second grade. Children with IEPs a lot of times are not asked what they want to be till they're 16 years old. That's a problem, because the lower you set the bar, the lower they're going to achieve. And one of the things that I do see within districts a lot, and Fiona, I'm sure you can agree with me, is, well, we don't have any speech therapists at the high school level. There are no children at the high school level that need help for their speech therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Really? Even those children who are high functioning autistic or who used to be called Asperger's, they do need speech therapy, because they need to learn how to switch their communication and their tone and the words that they're using depending upon who their audience is. They need social skills. The reason why they don't exist at the high school level is because they didn't, quote, qualify based on the speech therapy evaluations for speech therapy. And why did they qualify? Because we use the self, which will not pick up the issues that children who are on the higher end of the spectrum have with speech. If they use different evaluations, like the CASEL or the CTOP, those deficits will be picked up and will show the need for speech therapy. Because a life skill is your child, if they're capable of going into the adult workforce and or college, need to be able to communicate effectively with an adult. Communicating effectively with a teenager is not a life skill. They need to be able to effectively communicate with coworkers, their bosses, and their boss's boss's boss. Because the way you talk does need to change. And if your child can't make those changes, they will not be employed for very long, unfortunately. So the fact that pretty much every school district in the Hudson Valley does not have too many speech therapists for those students in ICTs and general education classes who are on the spectrum, that is an issue. Because a lot of times our kids get in trouble because they've taken the language very literally and haven't really learned the nuances of language. So we can keep going.
Yeah, okay. So partnership does not mean that you have to agree on everything. It doesn't mean that you have to trust blindly. but it does mean focusing on your child's needs. It means setting boundaries, keeping those records we talked about, and holding the system accountable while staying engaged in a problem-solving kind of frame of mind, as opposed to a punitive frame of mind or a, I'm venting my frustration with you frame of mind. Think of it as a balance, okay? With relationships on one side and accountability on the other. If you lean too far into confrontation, what's going to happen to your relationship with people you work with? It's going to collapse. If you lean too far into trust, the accountability starts to slip away. So for true partnership, you need to keep both of those elements in play. And remember, and this is so key, at the end of the day, who is the constant in this scenario? You. Okay, your teachers are going to change, your therapists are going to change, your administrators, are going to change. But you are going to be at the core of this. You're going to be your child's strongest voice. And that's why partnership needs to be less about how I feel about that person or how they speak to me and more about strategy. Because you are the anchor. You're the person that's going to keep that plan moving in the right direction with effective advocacy.
And since COVID, it seems to be musical chairs with directors of special education. They're constantly moving district to district to district.
Yeah.
I haven't seen so much movement that I'm now seeing post-COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, we're having some chairs that are changing every year.
Which really doesn't help matters.
No, it doesn't. But like Fiona was saying, you are the only person that's going to be at that meeting year in and year out. And by middle school, if your child is going on to the workforce and or college, should be in those meetings with you and should become the other constant in those meetings.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the organization aspect of this. So everything starts with a solid plan. And that plan in special ed is the IEP, all right? But not just an IEP, it needs to be an effective IEP. And that begins by identifying the needs correctly, which is why we were talking earlier about the importance of understanding how the evaluations work and that you may need more evaluations than the school might suggest doing. And then you want to be looking at those, but also the IEP planning should take into account not just those evaluations, but your observations, work samples, teacher input, your child's input, to build a really clear picture of where support is needed. Because if we don't get that bit right, then the whole plan kind of falls apart. If we get it right, if the needs are clear, then we can set goals. And those goals should be specific, measurable, and realistic, but they should also be ambitious enough to push your child forward. Every goal should be seen as a stepping stone towards independence and closing that gap. And then once we have the goals in place, we match the services to those goals. So when you're looking at it, it should all flow, right? Services, again, they're not just about hours on a page. They need to actually directly connect to the goals and give your child the tools to succeed. So again, I've fallen into this trap myself. We all have busy lives. I've looked at the IEP and gone, great, my child has group OT twice a week. That doesn't mean my child is getting what he needs. I need to go and look at the OT goals and make sure that those goals are being worked on. And I need to be checking the progress report to see if he's on track to reach those goals. Next page. Okay. And then, so that's organization of the IEP. When it comes to CSE meetings, again, preparation is absolutely everything, because you want to be able to walk into that room as confident as possible, and you want to be having in mind that focus, that you're going to be focusing on your child's needs, not your frustrations with the team or the district.
And so, I'm just going to interrupt here.
Yeah.
If your child is in their reevaluation year, meaning they are reevaluating them for eligibility of special education, do not let them hand you those evaluations 5 days before your meeting or at the meeting. That is unrealistic. You should have those evaluations at a minimum of 2 weeks ahead of time. Yes, the regulations say a reasonable time, which most special ed attorneys will tell you is 5 days. But unless if you're a school psychologist or a neuropsychologist, you're not going to be able to read those evaluations and get your answers, your questions asked in 5 days. The same way that the district would not make any determination on any information you give them if you hand it into a CSE meeting. For example, you can have Dr. Buell in Rockland County is one of the best neuropsychologists around. I can hand the district her report, which would be at least a minimum of 35 pages. They're not going to do anything with that report if I just hand it to them in the meeting. They're going to go, thank you.
Yeah.
So why should you be handled a report? You're not. Why should you be expected to read a speech pathology report at a meeting? No. You should have time to read that evaluation at home, meet with the evaluator, let them explain how these deficits show up in a classroom and how we can work to minimize these deficits. So really, when you go into that meeting at the CSE meeting, it should just be a formality. We've already discussed goals. We've already discussed the services for next year outside. We understand what the weaknesses are. I would tell you my meetings were probably able to be done within 10 minutes because I did this all before.
So with that preparation,
and that's your homework.
Can be part of setting the agenda. Oh, go on, you go.
That is part of your homework, is being prepared. And you should set the agenda. Hey, if you already went over all the evaluations, we don't have to spend 45 minutes of that hour meeting that we have going over those evaluations in depth again. We already went over them. Let's talk about the strengths and weaknesses and how we're going to focus on those. Let's focus on those goals. Let's make those goals appropriate and workable and meaningful. You know, write down your questions ahead of time. If you feel like your child's not getting the right services, have data to back up that statement. What's the data? Hey, I got a progress report full of PGs here. I have an outside evaluation that says this. My child's been suspended for 20 days this year, and we're only in December. That's data that needs to be brought in. You can set the agenda of this meeting. If there's something you want to discuss, you let that chair know ahead of time, and you make sure that that is discussed. If you're one of these people that other people can set off track very quickly, bring your friend, and we all have one, who has to get the last word in. Make sure that friend knows their job is to make sure that we discuss blank issue and not let this meeting end until that blank issue is discussed. If you need additional time, that's okay. We can adjourn this meeting and come back another day and time at a convenient time. If you know their issues, let the district know ahead of time, because that half an hour spot is not going to be enough. Tell them you're going to need an hour and a half or 2 hours. That's letting them know there's an issue that needs to be addressed. So you're going to write down your questions, you're going to track progress, and you're going to use data.
And if you're not sure what to do there, that's why we're here. That's the sort of thing that we talk to parents about. We talk to them about what data to find, how to write down that data, what tools to use, and so on and so forth.
And sometimes
one second.
Sometimes it's the wording that you use.
Yeah.
The same way when members of LifePlan are helping you get through OPWDD's front door, there's key words that have to be used. We could be saying the same thing, but if you use the wrong terminology, you may not get it. For example, you're not entitled to the best in the special education world. You put in writing, this is what's best for my child, the district has the right to say no. If you say this is what is appropriate for my child, the district either has to agree with you or has to prove why you're wrong.
Yeah.
You just substitute the word appropriate for best, but if you use best, especially in writing, you lose. That's just special education law. Next slide, please.
Folks, I do want to mention that we are at time, but there are a few slides left to go over. So if you're able to stay, that'd be great. Again, we're recording this entire presentation. So if you have to pop off, we will send it via email, and you can just kind of check out the last few moments when you get it. Sorry to interrupt, ladies.
No, that's okay. Sorry. This happens sometimes, but to be an effective advocate yourself, you have to keep it polite and professional. We don't want the meeting to focus on my behavior or my needs. It's for the child. What does my child need? Use your data. Get rid of your frustration to the extent that you can. Ask questions. We tell our children all the time, there's no such thing as a bad question. Ask your question. If they use a term that you don't know, you stop and ask them what it means. For example, when my child first went into Jesse Kaplan, I got a physical therapy report. The whole front page, I had no idea what it meant. No idea. Didn't understand the terminology, whatever. My cousin happens to be a doctor. I called up, he wasn't home. His wife had me fax that report over. I don't think the poor man got his jacket off before that report was in his hands. She doesn't know what this means, and she's got a meeting coming up. He called me laughing. He goes, describe her. That whole first page was basically saying my daughter was low muscle tone. And because I'm a nudge, and people who know me know I'm a nudge, I wrote the physical therapist an email asking what the first page meant because I didn't understand it, and said, do I need to bring this my daughter's doctor's attention, the pediatrician? She said, no, your doctor should know he's low muscle tone. That's what this really, I'm describing what her low muscle tone is like. And then she goes to me, I've been writing reports for over 15 years. This first page is on the vast majority of my reports. Okay. She goes, I wonder how many other parents didn't know what this meant and didn't ask the question. So don't be afraid to ask the questions. Make them teach you what those evaluations mean, or ask us for help. We're not speech pathologists. We're not occupational therapists. We're not physical therapists. We're not neuropsychologists. We're not school psychologists. Let them teach you. Keep the focus on your child's learning. Where are they compared to their peers? How big is that gap? And is that gap closing? You want to stay organized. Our children generate a lot of paper. And sometimes it can look like our dining room table had a hurricane come through it. We need to keep that paperwork organized. The more organized you are, the easier it's going to be for you to get your hands on the data that you need. Next slide, please.
I'm just going to add in on the organization. The process doesn't end when you leave that meeting. Okay. You want to keep track of what was discussed in the meeting. You want to follow up in writing and hold the team accountable, because you may be having the meeting, some CSE meetings take place as early as January, and then the IEPs don't get sent out till August. You do not want to have bad surprises on the IEP in August when it arrives through your mailbox or through the email. You want to make sure that everything that was agreed in the meeting goes into the IEP. So it's about really not being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the clearest, the most prepared, and the most persistent voice in the room. And then just 2 more slides here. So when the going gets tough, well, we know it's tough. Advocacy is hard work, right? I've done it for my kids. I've done it for my mother who was profoundly disabled in the last few years of her life. And it's very frustrating. There's going to be times when it just feels like you're pushing a boulder uphill, or when you leave a meeting and you're absolutely furious, or just the overall system just wears you down and you're like, how can I keep doing this? And that's okay. It doesn't mean that you are failing. It just means that you are in the midst of it. You're in the fight, if you like. So when that happens, I think the number one thing is, remember, you do not have to do this alone. You can lean on other parents. You can lean on support groups in your network. You can call people like us. And if you need to, you may need to step back and recharge, because this takes energy, and if you are a full-time parent with several children, or if you're doing a part-time job or a full-time job or whatever, finding the energy to do this it's hard. It's really difficult. So remember that it's persistence. It's not perfection that really moves the needle. So every step forward you make, even if it's really small, it is progress for your child. And if you remember one thing from today, let it be this: your determination is your superpower. You know your child better than anyone else. You see their strengths, you see their challenges, and you're the one that has a belief in their potential and wants to see them move ahead. Okay, so that's what's going to push through that red tape, your advocacy. That's what's going to open those doors to services and opportunities. That's what's going to make sure your child is heard. Okay, so keep showing up, keep speaking up, keep fighting, because when you do and when you speak, that's when your child is heard. And that's pretty much it. So I'm going to just go on to the final page there. We do have an evaluation because we're federally funded and we have to show that we're working with real people. So if you'd be so kind as to scan for the evaluation, we'd really appreciate that. We will send Kate a link as well.